why you hire a photographer at weddings and things.
Se ne sa fun.
Sorry, first panel of the expo, so
Yeah.
technical problems.
Yeah. All right. Let me know when you're ready. Oh, you're ready. Okay. All right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to our first of 3 panels this weekend, the SSRG Reunion
Mega panel.
In this panel, we'll be talking about the creation of Sonic Stuff Research Group, our sources of inspiration, the technical challenges we overcame, like these cameras, our accomplishments, and the site's continued legacy. And as the title implies, this panel serves as a reunion of various SSRG alumni staff members, our very first to be exact, all of whom have traveled from various parts of the country to be here today at Retro World Expo. Yes, thank you. And some fun facts. Yes, even Mr. Banana's pleased. Some fun facts. This is our 5th time. This is the 5th time I'm giving this talk on this topic. Last year I spoke at both Drexel University and the University of Delaware, as well as Retro World in the past. But of course, today is the first time I'm joined by a panel of fellow SSRG alumni here on stage. You're gonna make a clap sound?
Yay!
Yes. All right. Woo! Not only that, this weekend is the panel's first ever public appearance with regards to Sonic the Hedgehog, the Sonic fan community. You don't have to clap. And if that wasn't special enough, not only is this our first ever reunion, but this weekend also marks the first time the vast majority of us are meeting one another in person. So in other words, this is our first time talking without having to deal with lag. Good joke. Disclaimer. Please note that this lecture is a work in progress. We have done our best to present information as accurately as possible. Some details may have been stated incorrectly or omitted erroneously. Feel free to contact me, Andrew Wolan, with any corrections. In addition, this talk is not affiliated with or endorsed by Sega. The purpose of this talk is academic and a historical account. Okay, so before we begin, I'd like to do a quick familiarity check on the main topics we'll be presenting. So could you please do me a favor? If you're familiar with the character Sonic the Hedgehog, can you please clap your hands? And can you please clap loudly so the people down in the folks downstairs in the main exhibition hall can hear us? There we go.
Hey, what's all that commotion about? I want to check this panel.
Super panel. Awesome. Now, can you please clap if you're familiar with either Sonic Mania or Sonic Origins? Okay. Okay, now for the big one. Could you please clap if you're familiar with the Sonic Stuff Research Group?
I think that's the first time you've gotten that level of response.
Yes, usually it's booze. Okay, cool. All right, part 1, SSRG Who, an introduction. So what was my motivation for creating this talk? In the past, I'd kicked around the idea for doing this panel, but at the end I felt it was unnecessary, believing the history of the site was fairly well known. That all changed one day after I watched a pair of YouTube videos talking about the technical details of the Sonic & Knuckles lock-on technology. Both videos used information and or graphics from a hacking guide I wrote and published years prior. However, both videos failed to credit the hacking guide I wrote, nor did they give credit to me or SSRG, the group I ran in the past. In fact, one of the videos credited someone whom I've never heard of for the content. So I approached both video producers, only one of which responded. In our discussions, that producer mentioned he had never heard of SSRG or any of our team members. But he did say he came across the name Simon ROM during his research. He was also unaware that 2 of the developers of Sonic Mania, namely Stealth and Saxman, got their start at SSRG. It was at that point I realized the early history of SSRG and its contribution was starting to become lost, and thus that event inspired this talk. So who are we? How about some quick introductions?
All right. His parents knew something was up when he was counting down to Christmas in hexadecimal. Sonic 2 Hacking Guide creator, Saxman. From down under to downtown, he's now got a green card. Sonic Fan Games HQ and Hedgehog creator, Arlan. When everyone else was adding digits after their name, he was putting them in the front. Co-founder of Doom Mod, Sonic Roboblast 2, SSN Tales. That's him. He's so camera shy that he's standing behind the cameras.
In fact, he's over there.
Now he's over there. Well, okay, to the side of the cameras, off screen. SSRG admin staff, post-emulation zone era, Striker. And finally, when your mom picks up the phone, he haunts your dial-up terminal with the message, "No carrier." Formerly known as No Carrier, creator of Emulation Zone and SSRG, Andrew Wolan.
No booze? I feel like home now. All right, thanks for those introductions. As was said, my name is Andrew Wolan. Back in the 1990s and early 2000s, I was best known for creating or sponsoring various video game themed projects and websites. It began with Emulation Zone back in 1996, which started as a site that talked about console emulation. It later branched out to cover a range of gaming and console emulation themed projects such as game mods and modding utilities, video game fan sites, fan-made and homebrew games, news coverage of the gaming industry, a console emulation themed search engine / link database, which at the time was rather unique, an internet radio network, and more. On screen is a sampling of the sites either created or sponsored during that time. They include Sonic Fan Games HQ, TSSZ, Sonic HQ, and others. But all these sites, today I'm most known for being the creator and co-founder of the Sonic Stuff Research Group. It is also the site that links everyone here on the panel today. So what is the Sonic Stuff Research Group, or SSRG? I had a hard time coming up with a good, concise description about the site, so instead I came up with an elevator pitch that I feel touches all the major points. Founded mid-1990s by myself and future Sonic Mania and Sonic Origins developer Stealth, the SSRG popularized researching and modding of Sega Genesis era Sonic the Hedgehog games by helping to expose the secrets contained within them. The site also helped make modding of these games accessible to a mainstream audience and would be responsible for launching the modern Sonic game modding scene. The site also popularized Sonic fan games, which led to the official release of the Sega game Sonic Mania, which was developed by fans who got their start at SSRG. And because of my early contributions, community leadership, and support, I've been recognized as a founding father of the Sonic research and game modding scenes. Though I feel stepdad is a more appropriate term, I didn't invent either field. Instead, I adopted them, raised them, taught them my moral values, and then after they got older, they told me,
"You're not my real dad."
slammed the door, left, and now they won't speak to me. It would be nice if they sent me a Christmas card every holiday season.
It's in the mail.
It's always in the mail. So, what are the Sonic research and game modding scenes? Many know it collectively as the Sonic ROM hacking scene, but it's really two areas that are closely intertwined with one another. The first being the Sonic research scene. It's a community devoted to uncovering secrets found within the Sonic games, such as lost levels, unused graphics, and other game assets. This information extracted from the commercially released games, prototypes, old press releases, magazine articles, the development process, and more. The data collected is a culmination of the contributions made by many, many, many people, not just a few folks, and it's fueled by the fact that the game itself is hidden with so many secrets that it makes for a fun, addictive, and technical treasure hunt. So what is the Sonic game modding scene? Working hand in hand with the Sonic research scene, the Sonic game modding scene is a community that uncovers the technical details about the game, ranging from memory locations of sprites, music, and levels, to more technical details such as memory compression schemes and game mechanics. As the knowledge grew, tools were developed, making game modding accessible to a wider audience. The knowledge collected eventually led to the full disassemblies, which allowed others to create mods ranging from simple sprite swaps to new characters, levels, artwork, and even new gameplay. And much like the Sonic research scene, the data collected here is a culmination of the contributions made by many, many, many people, not just a few folks, with the fruit of our researching labor being the game mods. And on screen is a list of my favorite Sonic game mods that were made over the years. I'm often asked what I thought was the most influential Sonic game mod. And I feel that would have to be the Sonic 1 and Knuckles mod by Stealth. It did something Sega was unable to do at time, at least publicly, which was make Knuckles a playable character in Sonic 1. Now you had something you want to say, Bo?
Yeah, I'm sure all of us that had a Sega Genesis at the time, we saw, you could put Sonic 3 on top of Sonic Knuckles. You get Knuckles in Sonic 3. You put Sonic 2 on top. It's Knuckles in Sonic 2. Oh, wait, Sonic 1. Why doesn't that work? What if I take another cartridge? What if I take, Streets of Rage 2 or something? And can I play as Knuckles in Streets of Rage 2? But Looks like somebody actually did that. Yeah.
Right, part 2, why did I create the SSRG? To understand why I created this site, you first need to understand the mindset I had at the time. And the best way to do that is to travel back in time to the early 90s. And the story begins up I-91 in Western Massachusetts, home of such gaming innovators as Milton Bradley, credited for launching the game board industry. Dr. James Naismith, inventor of basketball. William G. Morgan, inventor of volleyball. And Thomas Andrew Tallarico, creator of Video Games Live and known for the music in Earthworm Jim, amongst other games. And the time frame for this story is the early 90s, the 1990s, not the 1890s. So technologically speaking, this was an exciting time. Observable leaps in performance were being made yearly. If you were not paying attention, you could easily miss out. So for example, the blocky graphics seen on the Atari games led to cartoon-like graphics on the Sega Genesis 10 years later. The popular TV show Reboot hinted at the possibility of real-time 3D rendered graphics in the near future for video games. The Sega versus Nintendo rivalry was at its peak. Nintendo, had just found their 16-bit stride with the Super Nintendo, while Sega finally found their mascot with Sonic the Hedgehog. The internet would be unrecognizable to many of today's users. It was not ubiquitous. Instead, it was a new, mysterious, and inaccessible place to many. But we all knew it would be the future sooner or later. And Sega was busy confusing customers with the term blast processing. Speaking of blast processing, that term was famously touted during TV ads promoting the release of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. No one knew what it really meant, but we all wanted it. So as a budding computer geek, that got me thinking, if Sonic 2 runs that fast on a $200 console, how much faster would it run on a modern PC costing 10 to 20 times as much? Of course, I was oblivious to all the computer architectural differences, but I was still curious. Then one day, a neighborhood friend of mine showed me ads for these devices called the Super Magic Drive and the Super Wildcard. They allowed you to back up Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo games respectively to floppy disk. An image of this Super Magic Drive is on the screen. It was rather expensive, $400 to $600 if I'm not mistaken, which was the cost of a modest game library at the time. But the device got me thinking, if the game could be copied to a standard floppy disk, does that mean you could play that game on a PC? We assumed software, aka emulators, to run these ROM images on a PC not only existed, but they were also developed by Sega and Nintendo to aid game development purposes. And thus, such emulators was only accessible to people with company connections or to high-ranking members of the underground. In other words, you had to know someone to get a copy. Now, did I know any such people? No. But that didn't stop me from asking. Now remember, at this point in time, the internet, as we know it today, did not exist. It was not easy to find answers to these seemingly easy questions. Google, there was no Google. The only real source of niche information accessible to me at the time were the local BBSs, and that was where I searched.
Yeah, so quick show of hands. Who here knows what a BBS is? Oh, wow, pretty good.
That's actually a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, definitely. We had this here just in case, like, oh, no hands. Okay, we got to explain this. So for those that don't know, before the internet, if you had a dial-up modem and you wanted to connect to an online service, usually a BBS is what you would connect to, whether it was, I technically would even consider America Online a BBS, CompuServe, Prodigy, all those guys. Those were the big national players. But there were also a lot of local people standing up these BBS systems in various locations. So you usually use a terminal program, you do the dial-up, it's really old-fashioned, and it was a way to talk to people, but you couldn't talk, across the country, unless you were on like one of the big ones. It would just be you're talking to your local town or whoever's connected to that BBS at that time. But this kind of just created the starting point for where people kind of got together, they would share files, and instead of having to sneaker net stuff between your friends with floppy disks, and you could get to meet a lot of new people and also trade a lot of files you probably wouldn't otherwise have access to. And a lot of times BBSs were focused on a particular theme or topic. So it was just a very interesting way to find niche information that's not available elsewhere.
Yeah, the key takeaway here is that BBSs were kind of like websites in that they offered niche information that were not found elsewhere. So in my search for a Genesis emulator, I poke around all the BBSs in my area, hoping to get in touch with someone that may have one. The closest I got was a BBS that claimed to have ROM images of various Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis games. What other information they had, I will never know. They wouldn't let me in because apparently I was not elite enough. So in the end, my search came up short, and I placed the idea on ice.
So maybe you were 1,336? just a little short there?
Yeah. Now, as a budding computer geek at the time, I thought BBSs were cool and even had the desire to run my own BBS one day. But there was a problem. Running one was cost prohibitive for the average teenager. First of all, you had to dedicate a PC to be a BBS server, and back then PCs were not cheap. Number two, you needed to dedicate a phone line for people to call in on. Three, it could only serve one person per phone line at a time. And even if you could overcome those hurdles, your BBS reach was limited to people within your local calling range. So I put that idea on ice as well, but I kept the dream of running one in my back pocket, that someday I'll be able to afford to run my own BBS. Then came the internet. In the mid-1990s, dial-up internet access was gaining mainstream appeal. With its global reach, the internet gave the general public access to far more information than found on BBSs. For me, gaining access to the internet meant I could take advantage of its reach and pursue my questions on console emulation once again. Eventually, I discovered the console emulation scene on IRC chat. There, I gained access to various console emulators, including an early Genesis emulator. It ran okay and had no sound, but oddly enough, it satisfied my curiosity, mostly because I learned about the challenges in creating an emulator. Now, at that time, having a simple website was in vogue, so many ISPs offered free web hosting as part of their internet access package. I experimented with what my ISP offered, and I quickly realized the implications. Once a website was uploaded, it could run as a remote server and not on my PC, and did not need a dedicated computer to act as a server. Could serve multiple people at once from anywhere around the globe, which at the time were mind-blowing concepts, was limited to how much I could post at a time, think tens of megabytes versus gigabytes that you could if you had your own local machine. But the bandwidth was higher, i.e. you can have megabits of bandwidth versus just 33 kilobits on a dial-up connection. And some ISPs had generous traffic or disk quotas, where they did not strictly enforce their quotas, allowing for growth on a budget. So in other words, it addressed the issues I had in hosting a BBS. So maybe I should build a website one day instead of a BBS, and if so, what would it be about? Then came the motivation. With the web becoming the new thing, a group of college buddies and I made a friendly, no-cash bet to see who could come up with the best website. They were Dan Chandler, Tom Connery, and Mike Eager. This contest was significant for me because it encouraged me to not only start a website, but one that was unique enough to win this challenge. So now I knew I wanted to create a website, but I wanted to cover a subject that others were not doing at the time, or not well. Something unique that would be a contribution to the growing web. So I settled on two ideas. The first was a console emulation website that was suited for a general audience named Emulation Zone. And at the time, trustworthy information on console emulators was hard to find, and there were many fake emulators circling around at the time. I don't know why that was a thing, but it was. So there was real value providing accurate information on this growing field. The second was a Sonic the Hedgehog fan site that focused on the games themselves and not so much on the fan material. The site was named Andy's Sonic the Hedgehog webpage My Way, where the Frank Sinatra reference implied that the page was going to be unique from all the other Sonic the Hedgehog websites out there. Both sites kicked off in the summer of 1996. And yes, that's a picture of me taken in 1998, if you can see that. Part 3, the birth and rise of SSRG. So the birth of the SSRG subsection. So after gaining access to the console emulation community on the internet, I eventually scratched my itch on how Sonic could play on PC. From there, I turned my attention to the Sonic and Knuckles lock-on technology gimmick. After obtaining ROM images of Sonic and Knuckles and Sonic 3, which in itself was a challenge at the time, I figured out how to merge the cards together and later wrote a document about it, naming it the Sonic and Knuckles Lock-on Technology Hacking Guide. This guide was published on Emulation Zone in a subsection called Sonic Stuff. It would be the community's first Sonic ROM hacking guide. Around the same time on my Sonic the Hedgehog themed website, I put out a request asking if anyone was interested in running summaries for the Sonic the Hedgehog comics by Archie. Stealth approached me and offered help, and after several exchanges, we became online friends. Sometime later, Stealth showed me a curious picture of what is known as the hidden credits listing on the Sonic Team Presents screen. Now, you have something you want to say about that.
Yeah, so what it was there were hidden credits that the original Sonic Team developers hid on that screen by changing the palette index reference. So there were 2 black palette colors in the image, and he found that, when he took a screenshot out of the emulator, he noticed there were 2 black colors in the palette, and he changed one of them, and all of a sudden he sees these credits in Japanese behind it. So Stealth also worked on Sonic 1 Mobile and Sonic 2 Mobile for iOS and Android, and he has a cheat code built in there where, I don't remember the combination, but if you hold certain buttons down...
No, you type in Sega backwards, ages.
Oh, okay. It will change the palette on that screen and reveal the...
Yeah, I think it's that, or it just takes you to the credit screen. I forget which one what it does.
Oh.
Do you know which one it is?
I'm not sure about that one, but it is accessible in the actual game. There is a specific code that was actually now hidden.
Oh, they discovered that.
Recently,
Okay.
where I think it's only in the Japanese version of Sonic 1, and then if you do something, and then that press start text also appears, the one that all the games now sort of use. But that was just oh, that's weird, that never gets used, but it actually was.
Oh.
Yeah, but the American version,
Yeah.
Exciting new development.
New developments, right?
It continues.
But I guess the goal of that one was that the original text, the credits were not the actual names of people. It was Big Island and stuff like that. So this was the actual names of people in this case.
Yeah. So that screenshot was added to the growing Sonic Stuff subsection on the site, which was then promoted to its own page on Emulation Zone. We then started talking about the oddities and secrets found within the Sonic the Hedgehog games. Me and Stealth, that is. And during our discussions, I recall the conversation I had a few years prior with some high school friends about some weird images they found on Sonic CD. I didn't think much of it about it at the time, but I did find it curious. And little did I know it was my first experience to the secrets found within the Sonic games. It was that moment I realized that the Sonic games were just packed with secrets and other fascinating oddities left over from development. I also realized that no one was trying to document it all either, which presented an opportunity. At this point, my interest in Sonic games and console emulation merged, and I wanted to focus on digging into the games or hacking into them to unlock their secrets. My chief motivation was the fact that, again, no one else had a website covering this topic, this type of content, never mind trying to explain any of it. In fact, I was surprised that while other major game series had hacking communities and editing tools for their games, none appeared for the Sonic games. So one big topic that was starting to be discussed at the time was the possible existence of a missing level in Sonic 2. It was fueled by screenshots of an unknown level in Sonic 2 found in gaming magazines. This is the image on screen. A hacker by the name of Tom Sonic figured out how to access the remnants of this level in the commercial release of the game using a game cheat device, thus proving the existence of the level. The graphics were garbled as seen in the photo, but it was otherwise playable. Sometime later, a fellow by the name of Andre Dirk came forward to announce that he had a cartridge with Sonic 2 that contained the missing level. This cartridge is believed to contain a copy of the Sonic 2 prototype that was stolen from a trade show and later distributed in the underground markets of Hong Kong. Shortly afterwards, Andre was invited to join the Sonic the Sonic Stuff team, which he did. And with the site staff growing in size, I figured it would be appropriate to rename the site to reflect its growth, and thus Sonic Stuff was renamed to Sonic Stuff Research Group. All right, now while Andre Dirk's prototype proved the existence of a playable lost level, he did not have the means to dump the ROM image and share it with others. Since the cart in question was once available in the underground markets of Hong Kong, it is possible the cart had been dumped by someone in the region and placed online. Using this approach, a person by the name of Simon Y scanned various Chinese language websites in hopes of coming across a ROM image of the prototype. A few months after Andre's announcement, Simon Y eventually came across the prototype on a Chinese GeoCities website. It was the same as Andre Dirk's, so it allowed fans to experience the lost level for themselves. And after Simon's announcement, I went on my way to ensure that Simon received credit for the discovery. Today, the ROM image is known as the Simon Y Sonic 2 Beta ROM, thanks to my actions, and it's one, if not the only prototype to be named after a person not associated with the development of the game. In hindsight, it should really be named the Dirk Y Sonic 2 Beta ROM. After all, Andre Dirk was the only person known to have a physical copy of the ROM image of the cart itself, while Simon Y went out of his way to track the ROM image. You could also argue that this ROM was common knowledge in some circles in China back in the day, so what Andre and Simon did was introduce a prototype found in Asia to the Western world, which gives you an idea on the information disconnect the world still had at the time.
Yeah, it was probably always out there, but we just didn't know Chinese. Didn't know where to look for it.
And as a side note, shortly after this announcement, Simon White joined the SSRG team. So let me take a step back here. Why did I name the site Sonic Stuff? Couldn't I come up with a more clever sounding name? When the site was first created, its purpose was to collect all the Sonic the Hedgehog related content that was building up on Emulation Zone by Stealth and myself. However, I had trouble coming up with a name for the section because I was unsure how to categorize the content we were amassing. Simply naming it Sonic Stuff seemed too simplistic. Then one evening I saw a TV ad for a sporting apparel store named Sports Stuff, and it gave me an idea. If someone can name their store Sports Stuff, then I can surely name my new section Sonic Stuff, at least until I can come up with a better name. But as time went on, I struggled to find a new word that properly categorized all of this Sonic the Hedgehog related stuff we were collecting, so the name Sonic Stuff stuck. Furthermore, the later renaming of the site to SSRG had a nice ring to it, so Sonic Stuff became permanent. Al Bundy would be proud. Growing the site. So in order for the site to continue to grow, it became obvious I needed to learn about ROM hacking. Outside of digital electronics, I was not well versed on low-level computer hardware architecture, nor had I done any assembly-level programming. Therefore, I had little knowledge on how to hack ROM images, but I was still willing to learn. But how would I go about doing it? Surround myself with people knowledgeable about ROM hacking. I would go out and recruit the best ROM hackers I could find to join the group. Well, how would I be able to recruit them? It's not like I had a budget to pay them anything. Prior to SSRG's renaming, Emulation Zone, the parent site, underwent some major upgrades behind the scenes. Realizing that the site was quickly outgrowing the hosting capacity of my ISP, I reached out for help in finding a new host. As luck would have it, Zach Williams, a one-time Emulation Zone staff member, answered the call and offered to host the site on ZTNet, a website hosting service he was setting up. This arrangement gave the site plenty of space to grow, allowing us to host other projects and websites, and to tackle more ambitious projects. It might not seem like much today, but back then it was a big deal. And to this day, ZTNet remains our host. And second, the site moved to its own domain name, emulationzone.org, giving it a formal online presence. And fun fact, a few days after we announced our plans to register emulationzone.com, some cyber squatter registered it before we could. He later tried to sell it back to us for thousands of dollars. So we got emulationzone.org instead. And at last check, which was last year, the guy still wants $2,800 for the domain name. So maybe he will lower the price if I check with him again in another 20 years. So to recruit talent, I leveraged what server resources I had and offered free web hosting. This occurred around the time when web hosts were reevaluating what sort of content they were willing to host. This fact was underscored by the SimpleNet crisis of 1999, where many Sonic-themed websites hosted by SimpleNet were suddenly dropped because of changes in their hosting policies. ZTNet adopted a hosting policy that was friendly to console emulation-themed projects, which many found attractive. This in turn allowed ZTNet and Emulation Zone to distinguish ourselves from the competition, and thus attract talent.
Yeah, just as a note there, with SimpleNet, what they used to do, they used to be a hosting provider, maybe they still are, but they were one of the few back then that actually offered an unlimited, limited space and unlimited bandwidth plan. And I think at some point they eventually stretched themselves too thin, and they're like, wait a second, we got to start curbing this back. And so they started cracking down on websites that were either high bandwidth or high disk space usage. And it's a little bit of requires a little bit of a, I guess, mental exercise, because stuff on the internet, I mean, if you want to find a website, get hosted, it's really cheap, really inexpensive now, but back then you had very few choices to pick from. And so by him being able to get co-located data center space with lots and lots of bandwidth and everything we needed, I mean, that was a really unusual thing at the time.
Yeah, we had our own server in the server room.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a big deal back then. Now, as SSRG was growing, in the back of my mind, I had a set of standards which I had the site adhere to. It may not seem like much, but I feel these standards are what will help grow SSRG and recruit the best. In fact, the Sonic ROM hacking sites of today follow these standards more or less. Number one, always credit the person who contributes a finding, i.e. give credit to where it's due. It stems from a class discussion in college about citing work in academia, namely Professor James Allen at UMass. It's a simple gesture that shows appreciation, which in turn encourages further contributions. Number two, collect all findings into some kind of formal and shareable form of documentation. Instead of having information scattered on multiple websites, consolidate them into one formal document or website and make it easier to find and share and to share. This was ambitious in an era before wikis or web-based Office applications and required a lot of manual work, but we got it done. Number 3, document how game modifications were performed so others could learn from them and recreate them. As I said before, I wanted to learn how to modify game images, but I had no clue how. The next best thing I could do was surround myself with knowledgeable people and learn from them. As an example, Tom Sonic created a document pinpointing some interesting memory locations in the game. I asked him to document how he found those addresses, which he later did, and it was to everyone's benefit. Number 4, make content accessible to the public at large. Discoveries and other information were not going to be reserved to those in ivory towers. Rather, they are for everyone. That idea more or less followed the mantra that both Mark Anderson and the public had for the internet in the 1990s. So the 60s were about free love, the 1990s were about free information, which was driven by the open source software movements that came about in the 1970s. And the language used should make it coherent for most audiences to understand. These standards allowed SSRG to grow in popularity and also help attract numerous talented hackers and programmers to the team. And attract the best we did. On screen are a list of hackers I then recruited for the site. May we become up-and-coming stars to the community. The most famous name listed here is Saxman, who started the Sonic CD beta page and worked on the fan game Sonic Retro. He would go on to work on Sonic Mania with Stealth. Another big name is Tom Sonic, whose early contributions helped kickstart the Sonic research and game modding scenes. Now, out of curiosity, do any of these names look familiar to you? Yeah. Which ones? Ezreal. Any others?
Saxman.
I recommend Ryan.
Oh, Ryan? Right there, too.
Did any of you guys used to hang out on the website Google Capital?
Yes.
Yeah.
We remember it, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, with Kulok. Yeah, Kulok.
Yeah, remember that.
As time went on, actually, this is your slide, Ryan. Yep.
Oh, yeah. So as time went on, new information about the games were uncovered from various sources, and in some cases, folks with inside knowledge in the community was like sort of sharing stuff as well. So in addition, technical knowledge grew on how to explore the ROM images and other oddities being discovered within the games themselves. So we're just hacking all sorts of stuff through and finding all sorts of interesting stuff. Several sites joined the SSRG to help manage the growing library of different things. So there was the Secrets of Sonic the Hedgehog that was started by Andre Dirk, and the Sonic Y Sonic 2 Beta page, but also things like Area 51, which took a step further in collecting all the lost objects and like, this is a weird little a fish that doesn't exist in the game, but here it is, and the like.
Yours.
All right, so, what was the inspiration for Sonic game modding in the first place? Like, why Sonic anyway? So, I think the first things that planted the seed actually comes back to early video games that contain content editors. And the first one that comes to my mind, at least, is Doom. It was officially supported by id Software that you could create WAD files and custom levels and graphics and, make it yours in some sense, and there was even unofficial support that people took it a step further and started hacking the executable file with utilities like dehack it. There was they had an FTP on ID Games where they actually hosted mods that people made, and you could go to the FTP, download them, try them out, and as far as like which console architectures, a lot of the early architectures I think allowed for easier modification of programs because they didn't run in protected mode. They ran in what's called real mode. If you want to find out more about that, you can see our panel tomorrow at 1 o'clock,
Yes.
right? Yeah, we'll go into more of that.
Okay.
There.
All right, next slide. Saxman.
Oh, all right. Microphone works. When we started breaking into these games, kind of figuring out things, we had to add. We had the addresses, the locations of the data. We had to document all of that. So Tom's hacking station was really sort of the first to really do that in terms of using a hexadecimal editor, and here's where this is located, and if you change this byte, you access hidden palette zone, such as it is. I had a couple hacking guides that I took that kind of to a greater distance, and then later on, a guy who went by the name Nemesis took that even further and broke it down to the point where we could actually create a full disassembly of one of the Sonic games. So that was a very big milestone. Another thing, we had many custom levels that were created, certainly by 2000. We had several. There were numerous editing tools. One of the very first ones that popped up was SonEd, created by Stealth. That was the very first level editor. There was also Ultra Mazomatic, great Sonic 1 special stages. Sonic Hacking Wiz Pro, that was enormously popular, kind of a jack of all trades tool. And then, so we figured out how to decompress some of the data, and then eventually we were able to import MIDI and mod files into games to give it new music. So,
Ryan, Playing Games HQ.
Yeah, so I was a 14-year-old kid living in Australia, and I wanted to start a website and tried it on Geocities style things, but there just wasn't any space. And then Andrew just happened to have a website where I could just upload a bunch of files, which was, and all for free, for me at least. And that worked out pretty well. I sent him various emails that were all, he actually still has them, and they're all filled with spelling mistakes, and I really feel bad for them. But somehow I convinced him to do it, and that allowed us to create a repository for games that weren't hacking, but were click and play and click and create, multimedia fusion, people who wanted to just make a Sonic game, but they didn't have the opportunity to hack some stuff, and not that sort of knowledge when we're all kind of 12, 13-year-olds on the internet and just want to just make something. And that ended up proving to be really, really popular, and got more and more people to just engage with trying to make this, or find sprites and so forth to hack that stuff out.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think what really made Sonic sort of a target too is that Sega didn't have any official real games out for like a 5-year period in the 90s, from 94 after Sonic and Knuckles until Sonic Adventure. I mean, you had these little side games, but there was no big mainstream game, and I think there was a lot of hunger out there from the fans for more, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And as the site continued to grow, it exploded in popularity, so much so that it was voted best Sonic site 4 years in a row by TSSZ, 1999, 2000, and 2001. Though TSSZ was one of our sponsored sites, I'm confident there was no conflict of interest in the selections. The site was available in 5 languages, which was a novel idea at the time. The pages were translated manually by a list of volunteers, and their names are on the screen. Part 4, my departure. So in the fall of 2001, with the site at the height of its popularity, I stepped away from SSRG and handed it over to Stealth. With the site doing so well, why did I leave? Well, for one, a lack of free time. I had just graduated college, began a career in my field, and was starting grad school. Therefore, I would not have the free time needed to handle the day-to-day responsibilities. Second, it was also becoming less fulfilling, with spending less time working on technical endeavors and more in site management. At first, I was fine with that, but later I found myself spending more time mediating disputes, which is not the way I wanted to spend my limited free time. And perhaps I could have worked through all those issues. In fact, after I handed the site off, it started to run into some trouble, so I came back and tried to restore order. But the following reason made me leave for good.
Broken PowerPoint presentation.
No, a faulty video cable. No, the relentless, obnoxious behavior of some people. As the site continued to grow, it drew the attention of numerous misfits and toxic influencers. I didn't have the time or stomach to argue with the people who just wanted to be obnoxious and flat out cruel to community members for their amusement. Now, as bad as they were, they still needed an audience to support what they were doing. Otherwise, they would fade away. Sadly, some community members actually defended these obnoxious individuals' behaviors and even aided in their activities, such as giving passwords to protected areas. Eventually, I had enough and left the community and shut the site down in January of 2003. Some staff members left the community at that time as well. In addition, some would-be contributors were scared away after witnessing some of the problematic community members' antics. And I do believe that some people are unfairly associating the folks who contributed to the early days of Sonic ROM hacking with the misfits that made the community unpleasant. Perhaps not publicly, but internally. It's unfair to the early contributors to the community, no matter how big or small. So why would anyone tolerate their bad behavior, especially if it was so destructive and toxic to the community? Well, for one, notoriety. Making a discovery or uncovering secret insider information can lead to notoriety, but such information can be hard to obtain, and new discoveries can be far and few in between. Some community members were willing to dismiss morally questionable behavior to anyone that can produce new information. Number two, social approval. Some people would enact questionable behavior to gain the social approval of problematic members. Three, some were bullied or coerced, which oddly enough remains a problem in the tech industry to this day, preventing new talent from entering the industry. And four, some did it out of boredom which goes to show their character. Now, would you risk your dignity or safety to gain the approval of people you don't even know? Probably not, but some would. Do you like that image? Unreleased sprites of Sonic wearing a bow tie. Just hop on in.
I feel sorry for that stock photo guy.
I pick on him every year. Now, don't get me wrong, the Sonic community has good and talented people who are doing unique and innovative projects, but unfortunately, the community is also frequented by people with questionable moral behavior that you wouldn't want to associate with. But don't let them spoil your experience. My advice: be careful of your personal information when interacting with folks, with any folks on there. Use an alias, not your real name. It's not recommended for anyone under the age of 18. And to be honest, you may want to try another community just to avoid the trouble. Now, you had some comments you want to make about
Yeah, and I think a lot of these things are not necessarily unique to Sonic fandom online either. There's a lot of other places out there suffering some of the same issues. You know, I think kind of like anything in life, you just want to make sure that you don't make a hobby, derive your life meaning from a hobby. And it can be difficult with some of these things, like especially this reverse engineering, because it takes such a high level of effort. You have to invest a lot of time into it. And so you really got to watch yourself sometimes, I think, that you don't get too attached to what you're doing.
Part 5, Epilogue. Okay. So community recovery. While issues in the Sonic communities caused some to leave, others battled on, and some had built enough momentum in their own projects that the turmoil within the scene was not enough to derail their projects, leading to some interesting results. So in March of 2004, Nemesis released a full disassembly of Sonic 2. This assembly gave modders access to the source code of the game in assembly language. This in turn would allow more complex game mods to be made that would be too difficult to pull off using binary hacking techniques. Later, Stealth, DRX, and Hivebrain would post disassemblies of Sonic 1, with their works later merged by Hivebrain to yield a cleaner combined disassembly. The release of these disassemblies marked the end of the binary hacking era and the start of the formal coding era. Also in 2004, Ryan did a reboot of Andre Dirk's Sonic the Hedgehog webpage and created a new site entitled Secrets of Sonic Team. Now, Ryan, do you have a quick blurb you want to mention about that?
Yeah, like at the time, with things like Secrets of Sonic the Hedgehog and Area 51, there was just a lot of different stuff in different spots and no real conformity of where this stuff actually came from. It was just sort of all over the place. So having sort of gone away from Sonic Fan Game HQ, I wanted to jump back into this, sort of culminate everything, also include stuff like Sonic Team at the time was doing stuff like Phantasy Star and Samba de Amigos. I was like, oh yeah, this seems pretty good to add this sort of stuff in as well. But also try to give credit to the people who are actually making this stuff as well, or finding these opportunities, finding the good scans of some of the really old photos. Even now you go back to scans of manuals from the early 2000s, like these are terrible. I need 600 DPI or 1200 DPI, like the real good. So that sort of stuff is where we were at that time.
All right. And after being shut down for 2 years, the SSRG website was eventually handed off to Striker, who along with Ordos Alpha and Stefan UK reopened the site in 2006. The site management has changed a few times since then, but it continues to be in operation to this day. So what kind of legacy did SSRG leave behind? What mark did it leave in the gaming community at large? Well, quite a bit actually. For one, the period which I ran SSRG is often regarded as the golden age of the Sonic research and game modding scenes, making it a model for other sites to strive towards, even to this day. It even made it okay to have a Sonic website that wasn't devoted to fan art, written works of fiction, or the like. Number 2, the site inspired future websites which followed and improved upon the model established by SSRG. Sites include the Secrets of Sonic team, as Ryan mentioned, Sonic the Hedge blog, which Ryan also runs, and Sonic Retro. Number 3, the Sonic research scene remains popular to this day as new discoveries and secrets are being discovered, such as the Sonic 1 beta cartridge found in the UK in 2021. The site helped popularize the finding of unused and cut material from video games, making it a popular topic in gaming circles today, such as the cutting room floor. Through the work of Andre Dirk and Arlen, their websites help popularize the discussion of bootlegged games. An example of people influenced by their work include Seth and Zach from the Classic Gaming Brothers. Are they here?
I am here.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. I didn't recognize you from your mask on.
His panel's tomorrow at 4. Don't miss it.
Yes. Number 6, the Sonic research, game modding, and fan game scenes have inspired folks to enter the professions within computer science, which I think is pretty cool. So greetings to all the fellow comp sci majors out there. Yes. Number 7, yes, this list is long. I'll read this one, Ryan. I'm short on time here. The community enjoys a vibrant Sonic fan game and game modding communities, both of which are thriving to this day. The first is SAGE, or Sonic Amateur Games Expo, which is a yearly event where indie developers showcase Sonic-themed games and even non-Sonic games. It raises money for charity, which is pretty cool. It was started in 2000 by Emulation Zone staff member Ryan Bloom, and it's currently run by Rummy. The next SAGE event starts next week, actually, on September 1st. The Sonic Hacking Contest, or SHC, is also a yearly event similar to SAGE, except it's for game mods. It was started in 2002 by SSRG staff member Nair. It began showcasing mods for Genesis Sonic games, but now it covers mods for Sonic games on additional platforms. As of 2010, the competition is managed by Spanner, while the SHC website is run by Sinosu.
Oh, so that's how you pronounce it.
Yes.
Never knew that.
Number 8, various community members went on to work in the game industry. So years later, Stealth and Taxman were later collaborate and work on, famously, on Sonic Mania. Various contributors to Sonic Fan Games HQ and Sage were later go work in the gaming industry. One such person was Jared Castle, who started out doing level maps for Sonic Fan Games HQ and wound up being the level editor in Sonic Mania. Another was Ryan Landley, whose roots at Sonic Fan Games HQ led him to Half Brick and now with Peak Poke. He is also in charge of Hedge Blog, a Sega-endorsed blog where he shares scans of archived print media from the series. Yar Har Har, or Andrew Minori, works at Unity Technologies, not United Technologies, as in the Unity engine. And there are others, but they wish to remain anonymous. And number 9, and finally, some members of the Sonic fan gaming community have gone on to contribute to the indie gaming scene. After making their own Sonic fan games, some devs chose to make their own games with their own unique IP, and thus many went on to become indie game developers. One such example is Spark the Electric Jester by Philippe Danilou. Have I pronounced that right? Before Sparks, his original Sonic games were Sonic before the sequel and Sonic after the sequel. And what about that bet? So there was Dan Chandler's Waste of Bandwidth page that ran various Java applets that loaded and displayed various graphics and thus wasted your bandwidth. Mike Gear had a web page that was so bad his ISP deleted it. Tom Comrie had T-State Technologies and now runs Anim Media, a website design company. As for me, I retired from Emulation Zone in 2006, but I continued to run a handful of subsites. I then started a website about softball, which later became versussoftball.com. The site was featured in an article for the Wall Street Journal in 2014. And oddly enough, some of my early softball pages were archived as part of gaming history of the web. Likely because it was on emulationzone.org originally. So yes, accounts of how poorly I played softball in the past are now part of internet history. All right, open mic.
Just skip ahead to the upcoming attractions and Q&A, and then we'll squeeze in open mic as long as we can.
Yeah, upcoming attractions. So later today at 5 p.m. we will host Let's Modify Genesis game for the first time. And then
Just bring your laptops.
Yes. And then tomorrow at 1 p.m. it's the SSRG Reverse Engineering panel. And then finally, as a booth-only exhibit, we will ask the question: what is robotization? And can it be done with modern technology? Dr. Zhang, who's over there, will be at the booth with a working bio battery demonstration. Yes. All right, open mic. You get the last 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll yeah. It's not like this wasn't planned or anything. So I just want to say that I think you maybe get a little. You deserve more credit than maybe you get. When I did my work, I was putting it out there on kind of some forums and anything. What SSRG did by joining that was take a small spotlight. It kind of brought all these various websites together and put a bigger, giant spotlight on my work as well as many other people, and I think that had a big impact at the end of the day. So
Yeah, because otherwise it was like scattered across all these different GeoCities and tripod sites,
Yeah.
and search engines just were not what they are now. So good luck trying to find everything.
Yeah.
Dogpile.
Oh yeah.
Or something like that.
Sonic ring.
Oh yeah, those. Yeah.
Web rings and so forth.
Okay. Anyone else got some?
Yeah, it was such as a kid in Australia, the fact that I was able to have an internet a website when my internet was real, and being able to upload things to an FTP, using front page was just a wild thing to have. But also now seeing things like the Sonic Amateur Games Expo and seeing games like Freedom Planet and like even the Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit, like. These games are actually really awesome. It's never been easier to make a Sonic game, but also it's never been easier to make a new, modern, inspired by game in a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really cool to see what people come up with every year.
Yeah, we have demos in our booth. Okay, we are out of time here. We will have another panel at 5 o'clock, so we'll have time for Q&A there. I'm sorry, we just ran out of time for Q&A, but come to our booth.
Come to the booth.
Yes. We have a booth this year, that's right. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Man, I think I got some ideas on how to trim it down for the future.
Yeah.
That was good. That was good.
Yeah,
You did. We got there just on time.
I think that's the first time you've gotten that level of response.
Yes, usually it's booze. Or